Alright, I'm back with the world's most boring pinball vlog, but I have been swapping over the Playfield for the high speed machine, swapping it out with the uh, touched up and cleared Playfield that I've had. So that's kind of rounding third right now. In the garage, I've got chunk of wood laid out where I transferred all the components from the top of this thing. It had, the ramp and the posts and all the plastics and everything that's been moved over off to the side onto a piece of wood to kind of keep it in the general area. So if you're taking off a ramp, you move it over to that spot on the piece of wood, and then you take off another component and put it there. So by the time it's all said and done, your components are more or less laid out in the area of which they'll return to once you get back to the game. So that was all done, and then I flipped this thing over, and this playfield was more or less blank. It still had some of the ground braid and the some of the lamp sockets and things like that, but I basically had them both flipped over, identical, got everything loosened up. I'm not one to desolder everything and then put new sockets and all that on. So far, I haven't had one bad enough to warrant that. Granted, I've only done a few playfield swaps before, so I don't really have a basket of tricks built up on how to do them, but the way that I've been doing them when I need to, they essentially just loosen everything up, desolder everything, document the whole thing with photos, and make marks on the playfield as needed, where wiring and stuff like that goes, and put tags on and tape and stuff on things so everything's clearly labeled. And then I essentially just migrate everything. I lay them side by side, migrate everything from the back of one over to the back of the other. You gotta do it in stages, take some time, you're moving stuff over little bit by little bit, but by the time you get all done, everything's moved over, and then you go to the process of just lining it all up. So by the time all this stuff got moved over here, and this is my this is my ridiculous rotisserie, non-rotating rotisserie. It's my masking paper I had on the playfield that I had to loosen up, but I don't have a rotisserie because it's not really practical for what I do. It would be awesome to have, but where am I going to put it? So for the few times that I've done a playfield swap, it's only for a couple of nights and then I'm done. So having a rotisserie, I'm not going to have it set up all the time. So make do with what you have. I've got a table, I've got some chairs. So I just put some of my foam on the tops of my chairs here to keep it safe. I've got this barrier of masking paper that was taped on. I loosened it up so I can start attaching things to the front here and poke targets and stuff down. But yeah, it's kind of a comical setup, but it works. And I'm just in my dining room, so I'm right underneath the main light here. It's too cold in the garage, and I don't have the space right now. So I've got everything for the most part where it needs to be. Intentionally leaving, where am I at? So here's the bottom. Here's the flippers, main two flippers, slingshots, working forward. I've got the pops up here, and I'm intentionally leaving the pop switches out because I've got to rebuild the pops. And anybody who's done work on a Williams System 11, System 7, all that stuff, it sucks working in here. I mean, I guess anything old solid state, it just sucks working in pop bumpers when you're trying to get the GI lighting. So I'm going to wait until I got that all in, get my GI lighting tied back together. Once that's done, then I'll reattach these. I did put new spoon switches on these stacks. I did put new electrolytic capacitors on there. I wouldn't skip this step. These are a big deal. The way these circuits work, this capacitor holds the circuit down long enough to make the pop react for a certain amount of time. Same thing with the slingshots. Any of these special solenoid devices, if your capacitor is missing or it's gone bad or anything like that, you're going to have an erratic kind of either a flutter or a really boring pop, really boring snap to the slingshots. To make it consistent, to make it feel the way it's supposed to, make sure you've got fresh ones of those on there. I've had games go from 0 to hero just by swapping out that cap. I only had one axial, so I just used the radial version here. It did have axials on it, but it's no big deal. Just keep the wiring tight enough so it's not going to get caught or shorted to anything. What else did I replace in here? I haven't replaced any sockets so far. I just reused what was on the other playfield when I needed something. I didn't have to put a brand new socket on. So far, all the resistors are accounted for. A lot of times the solder is given up years ago, and these have broken, fallen off. These are the warming resistors and the voltage drop resistors for the flashers, because the flashers are not ran off of the lamp circuit, they're ran off of the solenoid circuit. So the game fires a transistor the same as it would for another device. It does that for the flashers. The difference being that it's dropping the voltage down via these resistors so that it doesn't explode your flash bulbs. And there's also another resistor in line as well, and its job is to allow a little bit of current to sneak through to keep the bulb or the filament inside the bulb warm. So when you turn the lights off, you'll actually see the filament glowing ever so slightly. And keeping it warm is what allows it to then, once you apply full voltage, it gives a flash rather than just a bloom and then that's it. So it's all important. If your warming resistor isn't there, then it's not going to work properly. And if your other resistor's missing, it's probably just not going to work at all. But if you ever swap these out to LEDs, switching over to LEDs from incandescents, you do have to get rid of the warming resistor. Otherwise, you will have voltage leaking into the circuit. It's not going to damage it, but it's going to make it, it's not going to be steady on off. It'll have a flicker to it and some weirdness going on. One annoying thing about these playfields is they weren't really future proofed for working, for pulling things off of the game. So what I mean is, if I come over here to this side, we've got a wiring harness for, I don't know what it tied into, but the wiring harness, you'll have the connector anyways, will come through and feed through here and tie in. Great, that's perfect, that's what you want. You want to be able to just slide a connector through the playfield, tie it together, and you're good. But for the one of those that's on this, you got a bunch of this, where you've just got wiring, and that wiring is meant to be stuffed through holes, and then that wiring is hard soldered onto flash lamps, hard soldered onto devices above the playfield. So it's kind of obnoxious, a little frustrating, because then you have to snip it off when you're going to remove it, and you got to strip it and tie it back in when you're going to reinstall it. I could get squirrely and put a connector on here, but then I'd have to start finding new spots or auger out the holes that exist, make them bigger to accept that. I'm not going to do that. This game wasn't designed for that. This one, thankfully, they did put a slot in there so the connector's meant to go through, but they hadn't yet gotten to the point where they were doing that consistently for everything, just on something. What are you going to do? There were some weird things on this guy. They have some connectors. I've soldered them on for now so that they're soldered, but it has crimp-on, non-insulated crimp-on terminals here. They're rattled around. They'd slip over. This for the hold circuit on the coil. There's no end of stroke resistor on there as well. Thankfully, there was a new end of stroke switch, but not an end of stroke capacitor. So that's going to wear prematurely and burn that out without having the capacitor in there. But they do have end of stroke capacitors at the bottom. But what was weird is that they mounted them here, and I've remounted them there. But with all this heat shrink on here, I had to add this because they had the wiring, which, because it did not have an existing end of stroke capacitor, nor did it have a place to mount it on, later System 11 games and WPC games that still used this style of cap before they went to solid state technology. They'd have a bracket that came up and you could mount your capacitor there, and everything was nice and tidy. And if you order new parts from Pinball Life or whatever, that's what you're going to buy, is that style with the post on it. So they added that in, thankfully, so we can keep the end of stroke switches nice. But they just cut into the wiring, move this shielding back a little bit, and just soldered onto that. So you had exposed wire here and exposed wire here, and then it went down to these little legs. So I've reused the existing caps. I've got caps, but these were in pretty good health. So I just reused them, extended the wiring, remounted them. They'll do the job. This is not going to be a collector's machine. I put new end of stroke switches in there because one was scalded. It was all covered in white oxide, so that needed to go. And the other one wasn't even a proper end of stroke switch. A proper end of stroke switch for this application has dual tungsten contacts, and the one that they had in there had like a single wide contact, but it didn't look like it was a tungsten. It was just like a gold, and then they had one skinny one on the bottom. So it was not a proper high voltage tungsten contact, so that needed to be swapped out. So I've done that. But it's got all the original bulbs in there. They haven't LED'd or anything like that, any of this stuff. But thankfully, when I got through with all of it, every last one of my kind of standard wood Playfield screws was used up. And I have 6 remaining of the short ones, which, if I go to the pops, which I have not done yet, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So every single screw, and there's a few Phillips head screws on this Playfield 2 in random spots for different reasons, but every single screw that I had, every spacer that I had, and all the little gadgets, and gizmos, fasteners of all different types, those are all accounted for. So thankful for that. The organization that I did paid off. Wasn't much, but it was enough to get the job done. Plus, I've got reference for this too if I really needed to. I've got a high speed in the basement that I can go consult and check that one out too if things get really weird. But everything is there. I did replace the eject shield. They had a red plastic one, solid opaque plastic one that was cracked in the middle. They always are, so it's kind of just, if you're going to do one of these, just buy new eject shields. Assume they're going to be bad if they've never been dealt with, because they take a beating. So I swapped that out.